Did Trump turn the U.S. presidency into a $4 billion business? How Donald Trump may be redefining corruption in American politics. What if the presidency of the United States had quietly become a business model, no influence after office, no book deals later, but real-time monetization while governing? A recent political analysis suggests Donald Trump's second term may represent something unprecedented in American history, the conversion of presidential power into a financial platform worth billions. If it is true, this wouldn't just be corruption, it would be a transformation of the office itself. To say that Donald Trump is corrupt has long been a commonplace of American political argument. What is new is the suggestion that corruption under his second presidency is not merely extensive, nor unusually brazen, but structurally different. In a recent analysis for the New York Times, columnist Jamel Bouie argued that the scale and character of Mr. Trump's financial entanglements amount to something unprecedented in modern American political life, the conversion of presidential authority into a monetizable platform. If that claim proves correct, even partially, it would be not just a scandal, but a constitutional mutation. For generations, Americans assumed corruption occurred around the presidency. Increasingly, critics argue it now occurs through it, a presidency as an asset class. The central allegation is not that Mr. Trump profited from office. Many presidents have done so indirectly, whether through book contracts, speaking fees, or post-presidential foundations. The claim instead is that the presidency itself has been transformed into an ongoing revenue engine, one accessible to foreign investors, corporate actors, and regulatory supplicants alike. According to Bouie's accounting, Mr. Trump and his family may have accumulated $4 billion during his second term through a constellation of branded ventures, political patronage channels, and financial instruments that blur the distinction between public authority and private enterprise, even allowing for exaggeration or incomplete evidence. The structure described is striking. Historically, presidential corruption in America tended to follow recognizable pathways: campaign finance irregularities, post office enrichment, influence peddling by associates, and private sector revolving doors. The alleged Trump-era model differs in one critical respect: monetization occurs in real time, during the exercise of executive authority itself. The presidency becomes less a position than a marketplace. The crypto presidency, the most novel feature of the emerging allegations, concerns cryptocurrency. Unlike traditional campaign donations or foundation gifts, crypto-linked investments offer anonymity, speed, and global accessibility. Precisely the features that make regulatory oversight difficult. In Bouie's telling, a crypto fund associated with the Trump family became a conduit for large-scale foreign investment shortly before Mr. Trump's inauguration. Among the reported investors was Tahnoun bin Zayed Al Nahyan, a senior security official in the United Arab Emirates, whose investment vehicle allegedly took a $500 million stake in the fund. Soon afterwards, the United Arab Emirates received expanded access to advanced American artificial intelligence chips. Correlation is not causation. Yet the sequence illustrates why crypto may represent a uniquely attractive mechanism for influence in the 21st century presidency. Unlike campaign donations, such investments do not require electoral justification. Unlike diplomatic gifts, they do not pass through formal state channels. Unlike lobbying, they need not be publicly registered. Crypto turns influence into infrastructure. If future administrations adopt similar mechanisms, presidential finance could become permanently transnational. Pardons as policy instruments. Another episode highlighted in the analysis concerns Changpeng Zhao, the founder of Binance, who provided software support to Trump-linked ventures before successfully lobbying for a presidential pardon after criminal conviction. Presidential pardons have always been controversial, but they have rarely been described as components of an ecosystem of reciprocal economic exchange. In the American constitutional imagination, clemency is mercy. In the emerging critique of the Trump presidency, it begins to resemble leverage. The distinction matters. If pardons become tradable signals of executive favor, they risk evolving from humanitarian instruments into political currency. The architecture of legacy and liquidity. Presidential libraries traditionally function as monuments to political memory. Under Mr. Trump, critics argue, they may also function as channels for capital accumulation. Bowie notes that hundreds of millions of dollars have flowed into proposed projects associated with the president's legacy: a ballroom, a triumphal arch, and a presidential library. Tens of millions earmarked for the library are allegedly unaccounted for, according to reporting cited in the column. None of this proves illegality. But it illustrates a recurring pattern. Institutional forms that once existed to commemorate presidencies increasingly appear capable of financing them. Legacy, in other words, has become liquid. Congress, or the absence of constraint. The American constitutional system relies less on formal enforcement mechanisms than on political incentives. When the presidency and Congress are controlled by opposing parties, oversight flourishes. When they are not, oversight withers. Bowie argues that a compliant Republican majority has effectively neutralized Congress as a check on executive conduct. Whether one accepts this judgment or not, the structural logic is clear. The American separation of powers assumes partisan competition as a substitute for bureaucratic supervision. Remove the competition and the system depends on restraint. Restraint, however, is not a constitutional requirement. The lawsuit against the tax authorities. The most symbolically revealing episode described in the analysis is Mr. Trump's attempt to sue his own Internal Revenue Service for $10 billion over the publication of his tax returns. Presidents have often quarreled with federal agencies. Few have looked to extract damages from them on such a scale. Even if the claim fails, the gesture signals a shift in institutional posture. The presidency asserting itself not merely as the head of the executive branch, but as a litigant against it. In earlier eras, this would have been inconceivable. In the current one, it is merely unusual, a new category of corruption. American political corruption has historically been episodic. Watergate was extraordinary precisely because it seemed exceptional. Iran-Contra appeared shocking because it was covert. Even the scandals of the late 20th century were constrained by norms that presidents hesitated to violate openly. The critique now appearing suggests something different, not episodic corruption, but systemic monetization. In this view, the Trump presidency does not simply evaluate ethical boundaries. It relocates them, what was once a scandal becoming strategy. The opposition dilemma, Bowie concludes with a warning to Democrats: ignoring alleged presidential corruption risks normalizing it. Yet alternative retrospective investigation and asset recovery would carry its own dangers. Pursuing a former president's finances after leaving office would intensify partisan escalation and could encourage reciprocal investigations in future administrations. America thus confronts a familiar constitutional paradox. Accountability risks instability, instability risks impunity. Neither choice is comfortable. The international consequences. For decades, America's claim to global leadership rested not only on military strength or economic scale but on institutional credibility. The presidency functioned as a symbol of rule-bound authority. Even critics abroad recognized the stability of its norms. If foreign investors now perceive access to presidential favor as a purchasable commodity, that perception alone alters the diplomatic landscape. Soft power depends on reputation. Reputation depends on restraint. A transactional presidency weakens both. The road ahead. It stays possible that many of the allegations described in Bowie's analysis will prove overstated, incomplete, or politically motivated. Opinion columns are not indictments, and accusations are not verdicts. Yet the significance of the argument lies less in its evidentiary status than in its conceptual ambition. It proposes that corruption in America's highest office has changed. If that proposition gains traction, through investigations, electoral outcomes, or institutional reform, the Trump presidency may come to be remembered not merely as controversial, but as transformative. Not because it broke the rules of the American system, but because it demonstrated how easily they could be rewritten. The most critical issue isn't whether every allegation proves true, it's whether the presidency itself has changed. If political investors begin treating executive authority as something that can be accessed financially, and if future administrations learn from that model, then the Trump presidency may mark the beginning of something larger, the monetized executive era. Not a scandal, a precedent, and precedents are what reshape history.